So, a very late good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, Tengku Zafrul, Malaysia's Minister of Investment, Trade and Industry, who has kindly found time from his super busy schedule and agreed to give the special address at this conference. Now, as the latest World Bank's Global Economic Prospect shows, reviving investment and industry against a backdrop of slowing trade is a challenge anywhere and everywhere, and it would need a rock star to deal with these challenges. So, fortunately, Tengku Zafrul is exactly that. And I mean it literally because he's a talented and self taught guitarist with a particular interest in rock and blues music, and he rocks with various bands and musicians, including fellow ministers from neighboring countries. Not only that, he has a strong interest in running and has completed several marathons, such as the New York City Marathon and the Tokyo Marathon, and he reminds me of what I heard once. Tough runs don't last, but tough runners do. So, but not content with musical talent and running skills, Tengku Zafrul has had an illustrious career before joining government as a private banker and more recently as a former finance minister of Malaysia, where he led Malaysia during the trying pandemic times. So it is therefore no surprise then that Tengku Zafrul is now the person to drive Malaysia's trade, investment, and industry to new heights. And I had the pleasure of seeing him in action recently at the Meaty Retreat in Genting. And now you will have too. And believe me, you're in for a treat. So please join me and put your hands together for a warm welcome for Fatin Kuzafru. So, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Apurva. We have with us today also the Secretary General of MITI, Dr. Sri Isham Ishak. You will be hearing from him later. He's one of the panelists after this session. So after I speak, please stay on for him. That was the joke. Anyways, everyone's very serious here. Anyway, also thank you, everyone. Oh, got YB oncoming as well. I just on the way here, I was messaging him on something very serious, which I hope he takes it seriously as well. And of course, we have just now Mr. Yashiko Matsuda, World Bank Country Manager, and of course, everyone here, distinguished speakers, panelists, understand members of the media as well, ladies and gentlemen. So, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon to all of you. So, first and foremost, thank you to the World Bank and the Asia School of Business for having me to deliver this special address on a conference theme, trade and global value chains in times of insecurity. But before I start, I'd like to just again thank the team from MITI who have been working tirelessly the last couple of months on the challenges that we are facing today. And I personally believe that the forums like these are important, not just for researchers, but also for policymakers, global entities, officials as well, and the private sector to share insights, research findings, and information on identifying key issues that affect current trade flows and, of course, what are the solutions that we can work together to overcome these challenges. There is a strong imperative to overcome these challenges because if you look at this, what are the dividends? So the dividends that we can reap from greater global trade openness, global trade support, multilateral supply chain, and of course, prosperity and global peace, right? However, as we are all aware, we've been talking about this a lot in the government, talking about the trade sanctions are the flip side on the very same coin. Hence, decisions to deploy trade sanctions to prevent or halt any form of bilateral or multilateral conflict must be made very, very carefully. More often than not, it is that innocent people that will bear the burden, the real burden of any trade sanctions. So oftentimes we have to remind ourselves that the primary reason we trade is to enhance prosperity. I mean, that's the basis of trade, and we've seen a result of that. And we must never lose sight of this goal. So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, a few months ago, I was invited to attend the World Economic Forum. I think a few of you were there as well. This was in Davos, where I was invited to speak on several panels, including panels such as supply chain and transport, the global risks of economic fragmentation, and also living with risks. So these are some of the discussion groups that we were part of. And and I also participated in various conferences in Singapore and in Hong Kong recently, where I've been invited to speak, and it carries similar themes. Yeah, one thing that is clear when I attended all these conferences as a panelist and as a speaker, while the world is still recovering from the impact of COVID-19, countries, governments, businesses, and of course, us as individuals are already facing a multitude of fresh risks that continue to threaten as well as undermine the decades of human progress and development. So, in the world of, as what Doctor said just now, from my background, I'm from the world of finance as well as investments, where I came from. Every time we revise our key risk metrics, we will ask ourselves whether a situation calls for a risk on or a risk off approach. So if you look at what's happening today, in our current world, there's always a constant risk on mode since the start of the pandemic in 2020. Although the COVID pandemic has been brought under control, this is our fourth year facing a poly crisis, which is fast becoming, some of my friends calling it a perma crisis, which is, of course, a permanent crisis situation. For the short term, we have identified that key global risks include the slowdown in China's medium-term economic growth, if you compare to what it was before. Global inflation, of course, the continuing Russia-Ukraine conflict, escalation of the U.S. Trade, U.S.-China trade war, as well as, some may say increased geopolitical tensions in East Asia, right? So all this have led to major risks such as increasing interest rates. We have seen the currency exchange volatility, supply chain disruption, of course, is one of the topic today, and rising prices of energy and raw materials. So longer term risks includes increased level of debts, a new era of low growth, and that's what we're seeing today as well, a low global investment, and we hope not to see this, but there are talks about regression in human development after decades of progress, and of course, growing pressure of climate change as well. So while technology, I think everybody here will agree, is a clear solution to many of these risks, rapid and unconstrained development of technologies could also be a risk. I mean, we talk about AI, etc., etc. But, particularly when it's misused for sometimes civilian or military purposes. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure many of you had touched upon this risk in the discourse. I understand this started yesterday. And I would like to deep dive into a few of these risks, but from an industry supply chain resiliency perspective. This is because in a supply constrained world, certain risks and challenges actually they compound one another. So, for example, climate change that brings about more frequent extreme weather patterns are threatening lives and disrupting the supply of food supply, but with many countries facing scarce fiscal resources, which issue must the policymaker tackle first, right? So for the first time in many decades, businesses as well as industries are operating in an environment marked by scarcity and competition of supply. In fact, the global economy is already changing to reflect our move into a supply constrained world, because if you look at the value chain resilience, it has emerged as a key issue in most C-suite executives' agenda. In fact, many of the meetings that I have recently with relevant industry, this is one of their main concern. So when we meet manufacturers, for example, apart from facing double-digit inflation, labor shortages, energy scarcity, along with new regulations as well that focus on reducing waste and emissions. So all this headwind impose fresh operational constraint, and actually it covers as well hidden vulnerabilities, therefore fundamentally changing the balance of supply and demand in the process. So there is a recent, in the World Economic Forum, a report called Global Value Chain Parameter. This was issued in December last year, has also indicated a 146% increase in climate-related risks, events, and a 110% increase in disruptions driven by geopolitical tensions versus what has happened a year ago in December 2021. So all this have increasingly caused various global value chain failures. In fact, many global companies, including companies here, based here, have started to rewire their manufacturing processes. I think you know this very well, in response to the new supply constraint paradigm. And this, of course, in turn, also collectively will reset the global value chains. The faster all of us here can accept that fact, the faster key solutions can be found. And because Malaysia is firmly embedded in the value chain, especially in the global value chains, the next thing I would like to share is our strategy, the MITI strategy, on rewiring and transforming Malaysia's industry, to take stock of this new global economic mega cycle that will be characterized by value chain disruptions, resource competition, and climate change. So, ladies and gentlemen, since I joined MITI, I've always emphasized to my colleagues that in realizing Malaysia's true potential as an industrial powerhouse, a strong trading nation, and a preferred investment destination, what we need to focus on are our fundamentals in enabling investment, industrial, as well as trade environment, right? So given the challenges and evolving global economic landscape, we have actually tweaked the ministry's name as well. The acronym remains the same, MITI. So instead of Ministry of International Trade and Investment, is now Ministry of Investment, Trade and Industries. So we are showing that we are fully focused on attracting investments and, of course, reinvestments, right? And boosting trade and future-proofing our industries. So in terms of our long-term strategy, so MITI launched the new investment aspiration, the NIA, as well as the new investment policy, NIP. This was done late last year. And before I provide further information on our strategies, I want to briefly talk about the key challenges in the global value chain dynamics. So one key change that the report mentioned is that companies, when it comes to their strategies, the company's strategies, will no longer center on achieving economies of scale through outsourcing to the cheapest producers at all costs, but by replacing resiliency with profitability and sustainability to ensure service quality and long-term business continuity, right? So in short, companies are going from global to globally connected multi-local value chain. So as companies, they move away from the concept of low cost at all costs and towards securing supply of critical resources, especially including skilled labor, more and more reshoring, nearshoring, or friendshoring of production capacity and supply base will occur, right? On this, for us in Malaysia, the government, MITI especially, is looking to capture short to mid-term opportunities from suppliers wishing to secure or diversify their supply chains. So we simply, of course, have to be opportunistic as well. Malaysia may not have a sizable customer base for MNCs, right? But what we do have are all the right enablers, such as the rule of law, policies, talent, and natural resources. So that all these factors make it conducive for investors to use Malaysia as their gateway for the Southeast Asian market and hopefully also for the Asian markets. So directly related to this, one key industry in which we have an advantage is on semiconductors. Yeah, I think Dr. Sri here will agree with me. In fact, Tesla's recent decision to open an office in Malaysia was predicated on Malaysia's semiconductor industry's more than half a century track record, 50 years of track record, and well-known capabilities in serving the global chip supply and value chain. So if you look at it, indeed, being a critical part of the supply chain in itself goes a long way in attracting international business to invest here. But we must, of course, never rest, can't be complacent, and we must continue to move up the value chain. Next, we know more and more companies will move from regulatory compliance, they will move to innovative sustainability. On this score, our ministry is proactively de-risking our economy by crafting the national ESG, or they call IESG, National Environment, Social and Governance Industry Framework for the manufacturing sector. So through the IESG, hopefully the Secretary General will agree with me, it will be coming out by end of 2023, right? We will guide industries, especially the SMEs as well, on embracing ESG in their operations. So the faster we do this, the faster we can leverage on global companies who are now redesigning their value chain along sustainability aspects as well. So we must prepare our industries for now to ensure resilience of our industries in the global supply chain. We also note that more companies will move from economies of scale to skills, to economies of skills, right? From economies of scales to economies of skills. For example, by producing smaller, localized batch sizes and then duplicating their manufacturing networks and supply base. So the key resource here is actually skilled talent, skilled talent base that is agile as well as open to continuous learning and open to any location posting globally. So basically someone that is very mobile. On this call, I'm pleased to share that Malaysia is enhancing our public and private partnerships for technical vocational education, TVET, and MITI, on the other hand, is working on relaxing the red tape for high quality workers, high quality professionals, to ensure investments are supported by the right skilled talent. So through our agency, the MPC, this is the Malaysian Productivity Corporation, we also have the Academy in Factory program, where trainees receive on-skill training or continuous learning at factories themselves. Right. So further, I think companies will also, we believe, will move from doing digital to being digital, right? From doing digital to being digital. So deploying technologies such as robotics, AI, of course, 3D printing, quantum computing, and the likes across end-to-end operations to enhance efficiency and productivity, right? So this again requires skilled labor, of which Malaysia has ample supply through thousands of its qualified, hopefully English-speaking graduate as well every year. So, ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned about NIP just now, the investment policy. It does, what does it do? It provides a broad framework where Malaysia is where we are heading as a country from a global value chain perspective. And what I am most excited about is actually our reform strategy to build industry resilience and move our industries up the global chain, the global value chain for the longer term. So we are doing this through our new industrial master plan 2030, our NIMP 2030. So this NIMP 2030, which is also meant to build Malaysia's industry forward national policy or industry 4.0, is extremely crucial in preparing and building the resilience of Malaysia's industries for the longer term or for the long term. We want to drive industrial transformation by, among other things, we want to create a competitive industry with high complexity, right? We want to build a high income and skilled workforce. We want to establish strong domestic linkages, expand all the clusters that we have today while growing new clusters and improving inclusivity. So in other words, MITI is working on improving our industrial ecosystem from within its core, right? And from the inside out, while ensuring that we remain inclusive, get people's inclusive participation in a sustainable industrial development. So the IMP 2030 is also how we will move our industries up the global value chain, as I said just now, by building their resiliency and capacity for change and for ESG related demands. So take, for example, the sale of a computer, maybe a HP laptop at the New York store. In terms of functionality, the four main categories of semiconductors in the laptop are memory chips, right? Microprocessors, standard chips, and complex systems on a chip, SoCs, right? These components will be made by different firms in different locations, such as the US, Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, or China. When it comes to semiconductor production, the main stages are design, manufacturing, and assembling, which includes outsourced semiconductor assembly and test, or in short form OSAT. So each of these hubs combines R&D and design, in which high wage economies with manufacturing, testing, and assembling from low wage economies. So from the example, it is obvious which parts of the value chain is the most lucrative. In transforming our industries, hopefully via the NIMP 2030, we target to move Malaysia's semiconductor industries further up the global value chain by improving various components and enablers that will support that move. So most importantly, all these efforts must create new and higher paying job opportunities for the local workforce and opportunities for localization of other services by SMEs. We've always talked about being trapped in the middle income group. But in the meantime, we will continue, of course, to target FDIs into strategic economic sectors in Malaysia. What I mean by strategic economic sectors are economic sectors that are impactful, for our future economic complexity and for our future economic growth. These are, of course, identified in our NIA as E&E, which includes medical devices, pharmaceutical, digital economy, aerospace, and chemicals, right? So we are focused on attracting quality investments and driving industrial transformation that could create positive spillover effect to the wider economy in terms of, as you know, providing high and growing wages, uplifting SMEs, and then creating the target outcomes on the ESG front. Talk about new government focus on Madani government. You talk about social equity as well as governance, right? So, ladies and gentlemen, given the short time frame I'm given today, I hope that I've given you sufficient insights into MITI's policy planning to support your research on decision making. If you have any further questions, my Secretary General here at the panel later, you can grill him. But before I end, I would like to emphasize that the Malaysian government is committed to supporting the growth of industries and trade by working closely with all stakeholders to create a conducive environment for investment and sustainable growth. And further, as we all of us at MITI would like to say that today Malaysia is in a much better position policy-wise to prove ourselves, right, or promote ourselves as a pro-trade, pro-business, as well as pro-investments. So no matter what the challenges are, we are ready to stand. We are ready here to stand together to ensure we achieve the targets of Malaysia's industrial transformation in making Malaysia a prime, cost-efficient launchpad or support base for countries seeking to enter ASEAN or even Asia. So thank you very much.
So thank you, Minister Zafrul. That was an excellent overview. Of course, being the World Bank, I've heard you many times before, but it's always just refreshing and it's always something insightful from when you speak. And just we are very happy to have partnered with MITI in the past on the National Economic, the NIA and the NIP, and now the Industrial Master Plan. So very much we appreciate your support in involving us. And so would you be up for taking a few questions or, yeah? Okay, so So before the policy panel comes in, any questions? We have this unique opportunity of having Minister Zafrul here. I see Aditya smiling and looking around. Aditya, do you want to take the first crack? Just raise your hand and yeah, Yasuhiko.
Ivy, thank you very much for your overarching speech. And the conference is focusing on a variety of aspects of external impact on sort of domestic economic activities through trade and the global value chain and so on. And Malaysia, has, like all the countries in the world, just went through a major shock, which was the pandemic. And that I think a lot of the adjustments had to be made. You were Minister of Finance, for much of that period. So what lessons did Malaysia draw from that experience going forward? You said it's risk on constantly. So unanticipated, shocks are coming, right? And then you're having to be nimble in policy making. So what are the lessons there?
Thank you, Mr. Mazuda. Well, I think the word nimble there is the key answer to that. I mean, being agile and nimble, because what has happened during the crisis when we were facing it was at the height of it was the year 2020. And when we look around us, there was no playbook. Everyone was basically getting hit at the same time for the first time, right? So you can't say that, hey, can I cut and paste the solution when there are no solutions yet? And again, everyone also facing a unique challenge in a unique way, given the different so-called impact to the society that we are in, right? For Malaysia, obviously, there was an Oxford report that says that Malaysia imposes the most stringent COVID SOP after China, right? There was when we were meeting like 2-3 times a week, talking about SOPs, talking about especially MITI of course was very involved in what's going to happen to which factory is going to close, which factory is going to open. But even before then, right, when we had to complete shutdown, it was never done in any other country apart from China, where no one can move, right? So to answer your question, there are 3 things that we learned from that. One is obviously you can never be prepared for anything, right? And therefore, it's always good to ensure that we have a team that is ready to be, in a way, agile and dynamic to work together as one, right? So that's the first one, because it involves various agencies, various ministries, and in the end, it's actually all stakeholders, the NGOs, the private sectors, and of course, every individual here. So it means that we needed a whole of nation approach to resolving something, which usually people will just look at the government or the relevant policymaker to resolve. But for this crisis, it taught us that we need to all work as one, right? Secondly, I think it's also important to note that when this crisis occurred, we need to have a strong, well, not strong, but adequate in a way, reserves to come out with the various packages, not just monetary, but also non-monetary. The infrastructure, the healthcare infrastructure, the hospitals, everything, right? If we were not as well, if we look at other countries, there are some who are obviously more prepared or have better resources than us. But where we were, in the scheme of things, we had enough fiscal space to support many of the industry. If you look at the amount of support given, both fiscal and non-fiscal, it's close to 880 billion ringgit, right? It's huge, but again, it was because we had we increased our debt to GDP. I think, if I'm not mistaken, we had a ceiling of 55%, and then we went up to all the way to 65%. And YB Wong Kian Ming was part of the MPs that approved it, right? We had the what do you call it, the COVID Act, which allow us to spend it, and we also had kumpulan wang amanah negara for our vaccine. So basically, Malaysia was quite lucky, fortunate that we have resources to help mitigate. Of course, we cannot give all the support that we want to, but it helped mitigated somewhat the impact to our rakyat. And third and final is, I think, what's very important is the mindset. So, working together, having resources, and the third one, as government, as policymaker, the one that question you're asking, we need to have a very open, so-called thinking, thinking out of the box on solutions. Because if you look at what we did, and many other countries did, it's things that in normal circumstances, we will not have had done it, right? But this is not a normal, it's not BAU. So similarly, I think by adopting the same mindset today is important. And I hope, basically everything that we're doing today actually is as a result of what has happened during the crisis. It's the new normal, right? Simple example being how people go to work, right? I think many of my ex-colleagues in the bank are still working from home, working Monday to Wednesdays or working Thursday to Friday, and I think many professional groups are also doing the same. So the same here as well, right? So these are the third thing that you got to learn how to adapt and change into the new way of doing things. So, but again, those are the three things that if you want me to summarize, are the learnings that we, me personally as well, after what we went through during the pandemic, COVID-19. Thank you.
Any other questions? Minister's time is scarce, so
Yeah, I got 2 more minutes.
Okay.
2 more minutes, so maybe.
Okay, a lightning question just before you go. You very nicely described the innovation that is being encouraged to revive Malaysia's manufacturing sector. But we've seen that the share of manufacturing and value added in employment has steadily declined over the last decade. And it's the services sector where a lot of people are going, and also to not necessarily the most dynamic or productive parts of the services sector. So, if I can take you away from the tangible to the intangible, what are the reforms and actions that you're contemplating to make the services sector more productive and to harness this digital revolution that is transforming services?
Yeah. Well, first of all, we need to acknowledge where we are today, why we are where we are today. And we had that robust and frank discussion, in fact, 2 weeks ago. I think YB, Dr. Ong Kiam Ming was also there, but where we are, why we are where we are today, right? And one of the reasons is about, we talked about productivity, about how, if we look at productivity, the gap between us and our neighboring countries is narrowing. And when you talk about productivity growth, we were one of the lowest in terms of productivity growth compared to our peers or even our neighbors. And why is this so, right? And of course, one reason that was given is because the dependency on cheap labor, the low investments in automation and investment in 4IR related technologies to improve productivity, etc., right? Basically, there's a substitute to investment, which is low cost labor. And we've seen that in the last 10 years, right? Some are even accusing, not accusing, but saying that we are deindustrializing, right? Those are from but you were talking about the service sector, right? The service sector as well is in one of the key five, especially when you look at the digital economy. Today, someone asked me about where are we on AI, right? I mean, everyone's talking about artificial intelligence. We are talking about the usage of, by the way, my notes just now was not done by ChatGPT. That's what I think anyway. My team could have used it. But what I'm saying is, the kind of service, the service sector as well. That's why when I talk about digital economy today, we're focusing a lot on getting the infrastructure ready, right? I mean, Of course, we want to be the data center hub. We want to make sure that 5G is rolled out quickly. Today, also the government said by end of this year, 85% of the population will get 5G, especially enterprises, etc., etc. So I think basically those are the enablers that will increase the productivity of the services sector. Right? So this and today with the convergence of industries, right? Even if you look at what is services, what is manufacturing, it's already converging, right? Companies, cars, mobiles, people are saying cars are now actually moving phones, right? And et cetera, et cetera. So again, the thinking has to change, right? That's why I always challenge my team to change, but then everyone's still in the box, right? They will always have an excuse not to change. For various reasons, because and I've gone through this, many transformation in many companies. The change management is important, but you need alignment for that. So similarly in government, I think, of course, it's bigger and it's more challenging. But I think one important aspect to get that productivity up in services or manufacturing is policymakers have to have the political will, knowing what the challenges are to make that right policy decision, and at the same time making that belief or trust that what they're doing is right. And in such a case, it's not that easy to do. That's my answer, practical answer. Thank you, and thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.